At 7:42 p.m. in Chicago, inside a dim hospital room, the doctor said something that didn't just sound wrong, it felt impossible. "You're not a match." And for a second, Michael Turner just stared, because this wasn't a routine test. It was for his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, the child he had raised from birth, the child who called him dad. And yet somehow, his blood didn't match hers. And before you assume what that means, understand this: Michael already knew his blood type. This result shouldn't exist. And that's when the doctor hesitated, like there was more he wasn't saying. And Michael felt it instantly, that quiet tension that only shows up when something is being hidden. So he asked one question: "Run it again." And when the second result came back the same, the silence in that room became unbearable. Because deep down, he already knew the direction this was going, but he wasn't ready to face it until he went home. And here's where it gets worse. Because when he confronted his wife, Emily, she didn't argue, didn't deny it. She just sat there, quiet. And that silence confirmed everything before she even spoke. And when she finally did, her voice cracked. "I was going to tell you," but Michael cut her off, because there are truths that don't hurt because they exist. They hurt because they were hidden for 10 years. And that's when he asked the question that shattered what was left: who? And for a moment, Emily couldn't even look at him, until she finally whispered a name that didn't just hurt, it didn't make sense: Richard Cole. And everything stopped. Every late night at work, every unexplained absences, every moment Michael thought he was building a future was something else entirely. But here's where the story twists, because Michael didn't explode. He didn't confront Richard. He didn't even react the way anyone expected. He went silent, because Richard Cole wasn't just anyone. He was Michael's boss, the same man who humiliated him in meetings. The same man who had just fired him 2 weeks earlier without warning. The same man who looked him in the eye and said, "You were never good enough for this company." And suddenly, every memory felt different. Every late night at work, every unexplained absence, every moment Michael thought he was building a future was something else entirely. But here's where the story twists. Because Michael didn't explode, he didn't confront Richard. He didn't even react the way anyone expected. He went silent. And that silence, it wasn't weakness, it was calculation. Because over the next few days, Michael started noticing things he had ignored before. Messages, old emails, small details that didn't matter then, but now formed a pattern too clear to deny. And buried in those details was something unexpected, something bigger than betrayal. Because what Emily didn't know was that Richard had never planned for any of this to surface. And Michael realized something chilling. Richard didn't just take his job, he had been taking pieces of his life for years. And that's when Michael made a decision, not to fight emotionally, but strategically. And the next time he saw Richard wasn't in anger, it was in a room Richard never expected him to be in. Because while Richard thought Michael was gone, Michael had already done something behind the scenes that changed everything. And here's the part no one sees coming. Because the same week Michael was fired, he quietly sent documents, records, and internal communications to people Richard couldn't control, people above him. And on the morning Richard walked into what he thought was another normal executive meeting, it wasn't a meeting, it was an investigation. And for the first time, Richard wasn't the one in control. Because everything he built on manipulation, on power, on silence, started collapsing in front of him. And Michael? He didn't shout, didn't expose him publicly. He just watched. Because some revenge isn't loud. And here's the final twist. Because after everything, after the truth, the betrayal, the anger, Michael still had one decision left. And that decision wasn't about Richard or Emily. It was about Lily. Because later that night, sitting beside her hospital bed, she held his hand and asked the only question that mattered. "You're not leaving, right?" And in that moment, none of the lies mattered. none of the betrayal mattered, because while the truth changed everything, it didn't change who he was to her. And Michael answered without hesitation, "I'm right here." Because in the end, Richard may have been the biological father, but Michael was the one who stayed. Be honest, what would hurt you more, the betrayal or the silence? If this story hit you, subscribe for more powerful silent revenge and emotional stories, and comment where you're watching from: USA, UK, Canada, Australia, or any part of the world, and tell me if you want the next one even darker.